I graduated pharmacy school here in 1971 at Auburn and went to the Mobile Infirmary. Worked there for about 6 months and decided to really want to do something different. And actually read an article about computerization in pharmacy at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Well, you know, the personal computer hadn't been invented then. And so I thought, what the heck? I wrote them a letter. And next thing I know, I had a job at Johns Hopkins. I worked there for 3.5 years. And the director of pharmacy and I got to be real good friends. So we left, went into business for ourselves, and then we did that for another 30 years. After we sold the businesses, then you know, like many times when you sell your business, the people buying it want you to stay around for a little while. And well, I've been staying around still for ever since. We sold the business in '97, and ever since I've just been doing consulting work now on the business side of pharmacy. Product development, customer relations, sales, problem solving, and but now I don't have to worry about making a payroll every week. That's the great thing. You know, I don't have to, when we have other people taking calls. I did that for 30 years. Young boy growing up down in Enterprise, Alabama, you know, I lived a mile from the airport and I had a bicycle. I was the airport rug rat. So I would ride out to the airport and watch airplanes to get rides, and I helped my uncle restore a little Taylorcraft, and you know, got to fly in the Taylorcraft. He let me take it and fly, and here I am 13, 14 years old, but you know, 12-year-olds are driving tractors on the farm, so why not a 14-year-old flying a little two-place airplane? So we did that, but never could really afford, you know, to really feed my my passion for aviation until after I graduated pharmacy school. My business became successful. Then I got back into it, and then liking old things, I started collecting old airplanes, vintage airplanes. I think we've got 7 or 8 right now. And living an 1860 home, drive a 1939 Cadillac. There's just something about the older things that I really like, but I've got a beautiful young wife. But the B-25 was one of the more famous bombers coming out of World War II. Originally designed to be a medium altitude bomber, but it really gained fame when it was used by Jimmy Doolittle on the famous Doolittle Tokyo raid, April 18th, 1942, where 16 B-25s launched off the aircraft carrier Hornet, and it was our first strike back after Pearl Harbor. See, from Pearl Harbor up until the Doolittle raid, everywhere we came against the Japanese, it was one humiliating defeat after another, after another, after another. So the morale of the American military and the morale of the American people was pretty low. We weren't making much progress in this war we were suddenly found ourselves in. Suddenly the headlines across the country read, "American bombers hit Tokyo." You can imagine what that did for American morale. So that's what the airplane is known most for. I've had the honor for the past 18 years to work with the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders. I've organized many of their reunions, the largest of which was the 70th reunion at the Air Force Museum at Dayton, where we got 20 B-25s there, plus some of the Chinese survivors that had helped the Raiders evade the Japanese, survivors from the USS Hornet, all together for the first time since the raid, having everybody together. And we really wanted to focus on having some of the Chinese survivors there because simple Chinese peasants helped 56 young airmen that came down, parachuted down, or ditched their airplanes in southeastern China. 56 young American airmen were saved by simple Chinese peasants. For that, 250,000 Chinese were massacred brutally by the Japanese troops, who were infuriated because these bombers, these Doolittle Raiders, had hit their capital. So we've done a lot of interesting things with the airplane, but the B-25, only combat airplane of World War II that saw service from the beginning of the war to the end of the war and in every major conflict of the war. Last weekend we were doing the air show in Tuscaloosa, and for the last 10 years we've been representing the Disabled American Veterans, the DAV, at air shows across the country, and the things such as we did a Super Bowl flyover a few years back, the Indy 500. So we've been working with the Disabled American Veterans, representing them, taking their message out to different venues for 10 years now. And we were with the DAV at Tuscaloosa last weekend, and Jim Cook from here in Auburn stopped by, told me about Mr. Robinson, who lives right here in Auburn, and you know, was a combat veteran in B-25s with the famous Air Apaches and 345th Bomb Group, 5th Air Force, you know, in New Guinea during World War II. So we stopped in to let him see a B-25 again. We were hoping he'd be able to fly with us, but he's just not quite up to it today. He did fly with me, we come to find out. He flew with me on his 80th birthday 9 years ago.